And I'll do my morning or my normal reminder that our live sessions are only about a half hour, 45 minutes every day. So you still need to be working for at least another hour 15, hour and a half every day. And as some of you are finding out, some of this stuff is reasonably challenging, and it does take time. So please don't leave it. Don't leave it too late. You'll just get stressed out, and you'll find that you're too far behind. Okay, so I'm gonna move right into the skills again. I finished this up after our tutorial session yesterday, and this is what I came up with at the end. Yours might look a little different depending on which filters you put on it, or if you even bother to put filters on it at all. I just give you an idea of what what it could look like at the end. You notice I've put some effects on the letters to give it a bit more of a chromey sort of 3D finish. I put a color gradient. A gradient is just a transition from one color to another. So I put a gradient on there. I put a little bit of a bevel and metallic look, and then I put some fire behind it. I thought it looked okay, but it's just an idea of what it could look like when we're done. So the next thing I want to look at now, I'm gonna make sure I lock the black background so I don't accidentally put something else on the black background, and I'm gonna hide it for now just by turning off the eye, because I want to go back to the original and look at the original. It might be a little tough to see, but there's some text that's back here in like a really dark gray. That's the next thing I'm going to put on before I worry about the Batman logo. So I'm going to create another layer, go to plus, and this one I'm just going to call text. Writing or whatever you want. And now I'm going to write some things, but I'm going to use the original as a guide so that I put them in the right spot. You could spend a ton of time trying to find the exact right font and size and treatment. I'm just going to get something that's kind of close and in a dark gray color. So for the writing, I'm going to select the text tool, which is the big A. And I'm going to put the text tool over top of the T, and I'm just going to click it once. And then I'm going to start typing in what's there. If I type in black, I'm not going to be able to see it. So I'm going to put sort of I'll put a 50% gray for now. And then I'll adjust that later if I need to. I'm currently at 30-point font size. I can change all that later if I want to as well. I'm just going to hit caps lock, and I'm going to put the legend begins. And then I'm going to double click it and change it to gray because clearly I forgot to do that. So I've got the legend begins. Is that what it is? The legend, oh, the legend ends. I'm sorry, not the legend begins. Oh no. Oh, goodness. Yeah, of course, Inkscape crashed exactly when I'm doing a tutorial. Why wouldn't it? That's okay. I've got to go back and do it again anyway, Misha, because my program closed inappropriately. Isn't that awesome? All right, here we go again. Luckily, I've done this tutorial enough times in Illustrator in my life that I could probably get it back pretty quickly. All right, that is an important lesson that I should know by now, and that is when you start working with any type of software, you should be saving it. Okay, so I'm going to go to Save As, and I'm not going to save it on my downloads. I'll save it on my desktop for now. You probably want to save it on your computer somewhere. The file should be an SVG file, and then I'm just going to call it tutorial. I don't care what you're calling Batman tutorial, whatever you want. Just make sure it's a .svg file. It's a special type of file for vectors. Okay. Now it looks like it actually did recover what I had. And somebody asked a question about where the text tool was. I didn't see where to type it, is the question. And I'll just get rid of this and redo it just to show you exactly what I was doing. So the text is here. It's kind of hard to see right now. And the text tool is right here. So I'm going to click the text tool. And then you can start typing and change the color later. I'm not sure if it actually works to select the color before you start typing. And then I put it right over top of the T. And then I just put caps lock on, so it's all capitals, and I put the legend ends. Then I just use my mouse, and when you mouse over what you've just typed, you should be able to like click and drag to select the text. Then I'm just going to change it to a different color, including the T, so I can see it. And you're typing down here as well, but you can also see it on the screen. Get my color right. Okay, so I've got the legend ends. Now I don't want to click anywhere else with this because it'll just try to put text somewhere else. So what I want to do is I want to either hit escape, okay, or you can hit S to go to the select and transform object. When you've got this tool right here, the arrow, this is the tool that allows you to grab things, pick it up and drag them and kind of put them where you want. So that's the tool you want to use whenever you're grabbing anything. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, and you'll notice that my text is not really all that close to what they've got. And so it's you know, it's smaller, it doesn't stretch across the page. These are all things we can change. So if I select the text and go to the text tool again, I can just double click on this in the inside and select everything, or you can click and drag if you want. Doesn't really matter. And then what you can do is you can go up here and you can change the size of the font. You can change whether it's normal or it's bold, okay, things like that. Italics, just like you would in a Word document. I think I'm going to keep it in normal. I might actually change the font. The font over here, you can pick whatever you want. You want to try to find something that's kind of close to it, I think. Agency, it's not that close, but it looks cool. You know, make it a little bit thicker with the bold condensed. Now the main problem, okay, so now I'm back at that tool that can move again. My main problem is that my text ends here with the S, but if you look at the original version, it goes all the way over here. So I'm just going to stretch this text out. Do not just grab the handle and stretch the text out, because it actually stretches the letters out and makes it look a little gross. So I'm going to Control Z that. There's a tool up here, okay, if I am in the text tool. There's a tool up here that allows you to space your letters out. Okay, so if you hold it down, you'll notice that the T stays where it is, but everything else is stretching out. And it's not stretching the letters, it's actually putting spaces in between the letters. Okay. So if you think that there's too much space between the letters and you don't think it looks good, you could always make your text a little bigger. Or you could pick a different font or whatnot, but I think that that looks actually pretty cool, so I'm going to keep it. So I'm just going to make sure on my layers menu here, I'm on my writing layer. If you're trying to type and you can't, it's probably because you're on like either the black background layer or the original image. Make sure that you put in a new layer for each item. So I put in a new layer, called it writing, then I put some text on it. I could create another new layer for the bottom text, but I think I'm okay having both of these lines on the same layer. So I'm going to put them both on the writing layer. I could repeat all of those steps, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to go grab this original. Make sure you got the grab tool. I'm going to Control C to copy, or you can go Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to Control V to paste, or you could go up here and paste. So I've got a copy of that text up here. I'm going to put it down at the bottom. The difference is, however, I don't want the bottom to say the legend ends. I want the bottom to say the dark night rises. So I'm going to need to change this text, which is a perfect copy of the one above, perfect copy of this. So I'm going to go back to the text tool. I'm just going to click in there a couple times, and then I'm going to change it to the dark night. And chances are the lineup of the text will be pretty close. If you lined up the text properly on the top part, it'll line up pretty well on the bottom part too, so you shouldn't have to do too much to it. Back to this tool. This is important, is this tool right here. Because if you're on a tool like the text tool, and then you think, oh, I'm done, I'm going to go somewhere else, and you click there, it's going to think that you want to type more text in there, which you don't. So that's why when you're done using a tool, it's always a good idea to hit escape a couple times, and it just gets you back to the pointer. Or you can hit the S, and that does the same thing. It just goes to the pointer where you can start grabbing things and moving them around a bit. So I'm going to get in close and just kind of have a look at my letters, and it looks like This is pretty well lined up on the top. I'm looking at what's on the background. Okay, so, you know, the word rises ends right about there. And then if I look at the other side, remember, space bar, move the mouse. Okay, the T is in more or less the right spot. So it's not exact, but if I zoom out, it looks like it's pretty well centered. Okay, it looks like it's pretty well centered with regard to the space here and the space here. And the text looks pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. That means I'm going to lock my writing layer. And now let's just look at what we have so far. So I'm going to turn everything off for now, hit all the eyeballs. This is what the original looks like. So this is, again, what we started with. Then we added a black background. Then we added the writing. And we're just getting to the fun part, which is we're going to build the bat logo. So if you are following along with me with your Inkscape open, make sure of a couple things. You probably don't have this finished layer. That's just the one where I put the my final version. So you don't have that one. But you probably got these 4 layers: original image, black background, writing, and bat logo. Make sure that your writing and your black background and your original image layers are all locked. Okay, because we don't want to be able to change those ones, right? And then what you probably should do is you should hit the I for everything except the original image, because what we're going to do is we are going to use the original image so that we can trace our bat logo. And one last thing is when you're working around in the layers menu, make sure you're actually on the layer that you want to draw on, because if you're on the writing layer and then you try to draw something with with any of the tool sets, you're just going to get frustrated because it's not going to let you, but it's also not giving you a message saying, hey, you can't do that here. So if you're trying to use a tool and it's not working, just make sure that you're on a layer that's unlocked and also that it's the correct layer. Because once you start getting multiple things on one layer, let's say I had the text and the logo on one layer, it just makes it a little bit more difficult. Okay, so I'm just going to close that menu down. Quick reminder of the two sort of basic, navigation hints that are kind of important for you is control and mouse wheel spin is zoom in, zoom out, and then when you hold the space bar and move the mouse, it moves the drawing around as long as you're holding down the space bar. And that's going to be important because as we draw the bat logo, we're going to need to zoom in reasonably far to make it work properly. Okay, so I'm just going to put this screen up a little higher, and then I'm going to share. I've got that little tool that lets me share my text with you. So I'm going to, and my mouse movements. We're drawing the bat logo. It's actually going to be a bit easier, actually I'd say a fair bit easier than using the pen tool on that website, because we have the additional ability to bend lines after we've made points. Whereas on the website, you have to make the curves as you're clicking. We don't have to do that in Inkscape, which actually makes it quite a bit easier. So even if you struggled a little bit with the pen tool thing, the pen tool website, you're going to find that it's easier to do in Inkscape anyway, as long as you're using the right tool. I'm just going to click over here and make sure, again, my layers, I'm on the bat logo layer and that it's unlocked. And then I'm just clicking this to close it just so I've got some more space. We're always going to use the pen tool when we're tracing things, and that's just the way that vector-based graphics work. In this one, it's the one that says draw Bezier curves and straight lines, okay? Or it's the B key. If you're missing the menu, it's the B key. So what you do is you make sure you got this tool selected, and then it's just a matter of placing anchor points at each of the corners. Anything that's a curve, we're going to deal with later. And I'll just replicate exactly what I did before. It'll just be happening kind of quickly because I've already demonstrated it once. So click there. What's going on here? Oh, is my thing crashing? Oh, no, I can't see it. That's why. Click there. And I'm going to draw my straight line, holding control to there. Might zoom out a little bit. Then I think I had my point right about there, up to the top of the ear. Corner of the wing, and then I'm right back to where I started. And when you get back to the original, it kind of snaps there for you, and then it'll automatically end it. Now, if it looks like you can't see the outline anymore, it's just because I've got it stroked in black right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the original image. I'm just going to hide it for now, and then you'll have a better idea. If I zoom out here, move it over a little bit. Okay, so that's what my trace looks like right now. Obviously, it's not finished. We haven't done any of the curves yet, but that's each one of these corners, these intersections, is where I have placed an anchor. So when I've clicked, it's put down an anchor for those paths, and I've just used that to connect everything with straight lines. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the color of this just so I can see it over top of the original. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my pointer tool. That's the main tool, right? I can't remember what key that was. I think it might have been S. It is S. And then down here, I've got fill and stroke. Now, if you remember, fill is the color that's inside the lines you draw. So if I fill it with red, got to select my object first here. Make sure I'm on the right page as well. Okay, so if I fill it with red, it looks like that. If I want to get rid of the red, I can just go to the X down here. So that's the fill, that's the inside. But remember, the outside is called the stroke. So if I go to the stroke menu, okay, if I click on stroke down here, you'll notice that the stroke is black. Okay, there's black right next to the word stroke. Now I can go over here into my fill and stroke menu, which is right beside layers up here. And if you don't have it, I can show you how to get it. And then you can pick from a bunch of different color systems. You don't really need to know much about the color systems, if anything at all. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go pick something that's really green. Okay, so I picked something that's really green, and the reason I did that is when I turn my original image back on, I can actually see it a lot better now. And if you want, you can also increase the thickness of that stroke. You can increase the thickness of the stroke in order to make it even more, even to make it even easier to see. So if you go to stroke style, you'll see the width here. I can bump that up, and you'll notice that the stroke is getting thicker and thicker and thicker. You don't want it to be too thick because it can kind of make your curves look weird. So I just want to make sure I can see it. I'm going to get rid of that green color at some point, but right now it's important for me to be able to see it against the black background because I have to match the curves up, and if I can't see my lines, it's going to be difficult for me to do that. Okay, so the stroke and fill menu is up here. Okay, the layers right next to the layers menu. And I'm going to turn that off again, or I'm just going to hide it again, because now I'm going in and doing the really heavy detail work, which is matching the curves of the stroke I drew. Oops, to accidentally drew a square there. Okay, so I'm going to match all of the areas that need to be curved with the original. Now this is where it's like quite a bit different. It's quite a bit different from the website in that you can bend all lines after you've drawn them. So that's why I just don't bother with curves when I'm starting. You can draw curves off the start, but it's easier, I find, to just find the corners and the end points of curves and then bend everything later. And the way that you bend stuff is the tool right underneath the top arrow. It's the one that's called Edit Paths by Nodes. So when you click on this tool, all you have to do is go somewhere to the middle of the line and click and then drag. So now I can just drag this curve and try to shape it wherever I want. When you do this, you do have to do some fine tuning, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm grabbing this line, I'm trying to match it to this curve and get it as close as I can. When I let go, okay, I notice it's a little bit wonky right here in this area. It's got a bit of an unusual bend. It looks good down near the bottom, but it looks a bit wonky up top. If you click on the anchor point, which is that little red dot at any corner, you'll see these handles pop out. And when you grab the handles, you can change the shape of the curve in a much more refined way. So you can drag them this way, you can drag them that way. And by using both of those, just clicking and dragging, moving things around. You can usually get your curves to match very closely to the original. Okay, those handles appear when you click on the red again. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to bend this line. And I'm going to try and get it a little nicer. So I'll get it close and then I'll grab the handle and I'll play around with it a little bit and get it so I'm happy with it. You can decide at this point, do you want to have the ears have a bit of an outside bend? Do you think an inside bend looks cooler? It's kind of up to you. I think I'm going to go with just a slight outside bend. Okay, so we'll get her reasonably close and then just play with the handles a little bit to get it to where I'm really happy with it. All right, so if I zoom out a bit, okay, and turn off the original or hide the original, that's what I have drawn and that's what I have created. Okay. And again, if I want to see the stroke a bit more, I'll just go in here and beef up the stroke. You can also change what the corners look like, if they're rounded or if they've got a little angle or if they're super sharp. I'm going to keep mine at sharp. And how many pixels are used for the end points of each of these lines. I'm turning off the stroke eventually, so I don't really care, but you just know you can adjust all that stuff in this fill and stroke menu. All right, so I've got my bat logo, and now it's traced nicely. It looks pretty good to me. I kind of like the ears. That's going to somewhat represent what's going on behind it. Now, we're not going to have all of the scratch marks in the metal finish. That's more of a Photoshop thing. It's not really going to work out all that well if we do it in a vector-based format. That's more of a Photoshop thing. But what we're going to do is we are going to do a bit of a gradient. So the gradient, again, is just when one color kind of gradually changes to another. And it looks like we've got a bit of a lighter silver, and then it fades, it goes into like a darker gray, and then it sort of starts to fade out again. So I think we're going to put a gradient on this that tries to approximate what's going on. Before I can do that, or before I will do that, I'm just going to put a straight kind of gray background in, or a gray fill in, just so I have some idea of what the final product is going to look like. So I'm going to go to the tool, the select tool, just the arrow. I'm going to click on the edge of the line, and that's just selecting everything on the bat logo that I've drawn. So it's everything connected to the green line. And then I'm going to go down to my fill, and it says none right now. This menu down here is by default the fill color. So you don't have to go to this special fill color if you don't want to. You could just do it down here. So I'm going to fill it with kind of a dark gray, and it obviously doesn't look very metallic at this point. It's just a dark gray inside, but that's okay because I'm going to play with that. And now I'm going to turn the stroke off because I've got the inside fill. I'll be able to know where my logo is at all times. So I'm going to go to my stroke menu, and then I'm going to hit the X here. And what that's going to do, make sure you're on the stroke pane because there's a fill one here too, right? The X is going to get rid of the stroke. It's going to hide it. It's still there. I could still click on it, and I could still turn it back on, but I don't want it to show in my final version because I picked the neon green and it just looks lame. Maybe I'll put a stroke on later, but for now, I'll just hide it and go with the gray. So I've got my gray fill, and that's what it looks like so far. And you should always go back and sort of just test things out. So if I go to my layers menu and I look at, okay, here's what the original looks like. Okay, now I'm going to see what I did. I drew a black background. I drew some writing, and then I put a bat logo on it, and it's looking pretty good right now. I'm pretty happy. It looks nice and sharp. Remember, the whole point of vector-based drawings is that you can make them as big as you want and never lose any quality. So when I'm looking at the original, which is a pixel version or a raster version, you notice how crappy it looks when I zoom in. Well, compare that to what I've drawn. If I find a corner here, look at how sharp this remains compared to the background. I can zoom in forever and it's still perfectly sharp. That's the whole point. You see all the blurriness in the background from the original image? There's a gradient tool right here. See, it says edit or create and edit gradients, or you can hit the G key. That's the tool that I'm going to use. So I'm going to click on the bat just so that I make sure that I'm applying the gradient colors to the right thing. And then I'm going to click on the gradient tool and I'm going to start at one side of the bat and go to the other. Now in the original, if I remember correctly, the gradients go up and down. So maybe I should do that instead, but you can draw a gradient on any angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go sort of to the middle of the bat. I'm going to click, hold, drag straight down. Okay, holding the control key. And then I'm going to go right to the tail of the bat. And then I'm going to let go. Now you can see it's already done a little bit of a gradient because our color here is lighter than it is here, and the color at the bottom is darker than it is at the top. So it's already put a bit of a gradient on it, but we're going to adjust that gradient and make it exactly what we want it to be. All right, so a gradient has a starting color and an ending color, but you can have more than one color. You can have as many gradients as you want. I think I'm just going to have 3 points. I'm going to have a start color, I'm going to have a color right in the middle, and I'm going to have a color at the end at the bottom of the tail. In order to add what's called a stop to the gradient or a new color, you have to remember this. You have to go to the line, the gradient line, so make sure, first off, you're on the gradient tool, and you should be because you just drew the gradient. Click, drag, and let go. And then, in order to add a stop, okay, you have to double click. Okay, so you have to get near the line where you want your color to be. And then you see a little plus sign pop up. Now you double click and you've got another line, you've got another gradient point there. In order to adjust the colors of the gradient, I recommend you go to this tool that we've used before, the color tool. That's where we went to change the stroke and the fill. Make sure you go to the fill section because it's the inside we care about. Okay. And now you see there's a choice of types of gradients. So a linear gradient is a gradient that goes in a straight line from one color to the other. And you can see that happening here when I just kind of grab the handle and play around with it. You see there's kind of a line moving up and down. That's a linear gradient. There's another type of gradient called a radial gradient. And a radial, radius, is a circle. You'll notice that that gradient starts at a point and then it goes out based on you know, like a circular sort of motion, right? So that's a radial gradient. And then there's all sorts of other stuff. There's patterns and things that you can do. And we're not going to play with that too much. We just want a simple radial gradient. So just going to redraw that. Somehow I got rid of it. So starting at the top, right in the middle. Make sure I'm on the gradient tool. Make sure I'm on the right layer. Make sure I've got the bat selected. And then I'm going to draw my gradient again. Oh, it looks like it's kind of crashing on me right now, so I don't want that to happen. Also, I'm constantly clicking on the wrong screen. My gradient's not working here. Gradient, fill. Gradient, there it is. Okay, so I've got this gradient totally backwards right now. I wanted to start at the top. And you'll have to play with it a little bit, but it's not too hard to figure out. Got to the bottom, I wanted to add a color to the middle, double click. Okay, so now I can start dragging these things around and playing with it. So you see if I grab the middle part there, I'm basically making it darker on the bottom half, or I can make it lighter in the bottom half. I can pick exactly what color each of these points are going to be. So I'm just going to have a look at the original. Okay, so if I look at the original, it looks like it's almost white, and then a dark gray, and then a light gray. So if I wanted to replicate that as closely as possible, I can. Okay, so I'm just going to turn my black background on, otherwise I won't be able to see it. Turn the bat logo on. So if I want to get that, you know, reasonably close, then I could do that. So I'm just going to go back to that paint menu, okay, And then my first gradient point is right here at the top. And it's asking me, what color do you want that to be? I said I want it to be almost white. There's a bunch of different color things you can use. I usually just go to the wheel. The wheel tends to be easier for me. So I said it was almost white. So I'm going to put it, you know, down here in this corner. And then you can play with the opacity of a little bit. It's kind of a bit on the red spectrum right now. So I might rotate this a bit to more of a blue. Depends what sort of theme you want, I guess. And then I'll click inside to there, and then I'll just bring, actually, no, I probably should go out here somewhere. Okay, that's kind of whitish. It might have like a slight bluish tinge to it, but not too bad. Again, you can kind of dial that in or out just by using all these different menus and sliders. So there's my top one. Now my middle one, I said I wanted to be a darker gray, right? So if I want a darker gray, I'm just going to go over here like this and pick something, maybe darken it up just a bit more. And then I'll go down to my bottom one, and I wanted that to be a light gray. So a light gray, I'm going to dial that way back, pull it back to here. And I've got a light to a dark to a light, but I've got a pretty noticeable line there. And that line will move up and down as I drag this middle one. So I would probably, in this case, go back to the middle one. And then I would, oops, go to the top, then I'll go back to the middle. And then I would maybe take that middle one down a little bit. Just trying to get that line out of the middle. It's a bit annoying. Dunbar. Totally screwed it up because I went back to where I was. There it is. Hey, the only thing I'm not crazy about right now is that it looks like there's a visual line there. So I might put another stop in there just to kind of stretch that out a little bit. Again, just double clicking and kind of dragging. Okay, so it's subtle. It's subtle, but we can play with that. Also, we can put a blur on that later to make it work even better. I'm just going to put a slight red tint on it. Okay, so you know, you can make it a solid color. You could make it a gradient from top to bottom. You could also have that gradient go from left to right, right to left. It's all about where you place the points and where you drag them to, and what colors those points are. So if I did this, now I've basically just reversed the gradient. Instead of going up and down, now it's going now it's going left to right. You got to make sure you're grabbing the point. Okay, so you know, if I did something like this, now you'll notice the colors change. Remember, hit Control-Z if you screw up, saves you a lot of trouble. Now I've got it changing so that it's a left to right kind of deal. And when I look at the final version here, just clicking, yeah, it's got sort of that silver metallic look to it, which is, I think, a lot better than just having one straight color. Now, the only other things I did to mine is I clicked on, made sure I'm on the right layer, on my bat logo layer, and then I made sure I was clicked on the bat, and then this is just a matter of playing with it and fine-tuning it. If you go up to filters, there's a bunch of filters that you can automatically apply to it to put different effects on it. So if I were, for instance, to put in a metallic paint look, okay, see how it sort of gives it that, gives it a bit of a sheen. And you can go over to the filter editor. It's on that same menu as it's on the same menu as layers and the stroke and fill and whatnot. It's down here. I wouldn't play with this stuff too much, but oftentimes at the bottom, there's a little slider that you can use to just try to sample around and see what it does. Okay? And then if you don't like it, you can always just Control-Z and get rid of it, and then try a different filter. So I didn't really like the way that one looked. I thought it was lame. So I might go back in and try, you know, is glowing metal any better? Okay. That didn't appear to do much, if anything at all. So clearly that effect was terrible. How about a ridge? Oh, that one looks cooler. Okay, so I like that metallic ridge look. I'm not going to play with the, I'm not going to play with this part, but I might zoom down and, oh, you can't see it. I'm zoomed in a bit too far. Yeah, zoom in. Sorry, that there's sliders down here is what I was referring to. So maybe if I think that's you know, too much or not enough or whatever, I could just pull this slider back and forth. Okay. And then I've got that sort of beveled edge look, which I think makes it look three-dimensional and kind of cool. And then there's all sorts of crazy stuff. I think I put fire on this somehow. I can't remember which one I used to put fire on, but I just played around with them a lot and had some fun with it. And shadows and glows, scatter, ridges, protrusions, fire. Haha, fire. Okay, so at the end of the day, you make it what you want it to be. But the point is, we started with something that looked like this and was, you know, almost completely unusable if we wanted to print it out at a bigger size. And then we ended up with this, which we could literally print to be the size of a skyscraper and not lose any quality. All in about 15 minutes if you know what you're doing with free tools. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, I think. And hopefully you're able to trace a couple and then maybe do something on your own, a custom personal logo or something like that you think looks cool. So when you're looking at your gradients, wherever you double click on the line, it'll add another point that you can play with. So you can have as many as you want. You can make it a rainbow if you want, right? It doesn't matter. So for instance, that section right there is red. You know, if I click on this one here, then I can make that section. I can make that section green. Green. You know, so you can do whatever you want. Did that. How did I add the metal effect? I just made sure I was on the correct layer. Again, the bat layer. Bat logo, sorry, and then you go up to filters, and your filters might be a little different than mine, but I think they'll probably be the same. And then I went to metallized ridge, metallicized ridge in ridges. There's a ton of them, right? Like you can go up and, you know, there's bright metal. I think I tried this one. I thought it looked lame, so I didn't keep it. And most of them look pretty crappy, to be honest with you. Here's 3D wood. You know, looks like a fur-covered bat or something. We've got all the tutorials. You've got everything you need to know.